My own daughter thought that sharing my DNA meant I would blindly support her attempts to destroy a good man's life. She assumed that because I was her father, I would help her bury the truth and rob her husband of everything he had worked for. She did not realize that I value honor over blood, and she certainly did not expect me to be the star witness for the defense. If you enjoy stories about justice being served and family secrets coming to light, please verify your subscription to the channel right now. Take a moment to check that the subscribe button is clicked and leave a comment below telling me if you think a father should ever testify against his own child. I read every single guess. I am 72 years old, and I have spent my life building two things: a modest fortune in real estate and a reputation for absolute honesty. My name is Thomas, though most people in town just call me Sir or Mr. H. I have lived by a code that seems to be dying out these days. You treat people with respect, you keep your word, and you never kick a man when he is down. Unfortunately, somewhere along the line, I failed to pass those values on to my daughter, June. June was my only child. My late wife and I spoiled her, I admit that. We gave her everything she wanted, thinking we were showing love, but instead, we were feeding a bottomless pit of entitlement. By the time she was 40, June was a beautiful, sharp-tongued woman who viewed people as resources to be mined rather than human beings to be cherished. The only redeeming choice she ever made was marrying Javier. Javier was a contractor I had hired to renovate my guest cottage 15 years ago. He was a quiet, stoic man who let his work speak for him. He had rough hands and a gentle heart. I never understood what he saw in June, but he worshipped her. He built her a life of comfort, working 60-hour weeks to fund her lifestyle. They had no children, which I secretly regarded as a blessing, as I feared what June would do to a child's psyche. For a decade, things seemed stable. I lived in the main house on our family estate, and June and Javier lived in the large Victorian home I had gifted them down the road. I saw Javier more than I saw my own daughter. We would drink coffee on my porch on Sunday mornings. He was the son I never had. Then came the shift. About 6 months ago, June started coming over to my house alone. She would pace around my living room, picking up expensive vases and inspecting them, making offhand comments about how much the estate was worth. She started complaining about Javier. She said he was distant. She said he was controlling. She said he was hiding money. I knew Javier. The man didn't have a deceptive bone in his body. I listened, but I remained skeptical. One evening, June arrived at my door in tears. She had a bruise on her arm. She told me Javier had grabbed her during an argument. She said she was terrified. She said she needed to file for divorce, and she needed me to pay for the best shark of a lawyer in the city because she wanted to take him for everything. She wanted the house, his retirement accounts, and spousal support that would bleed him dry for the rest of his life. I looked at the bruise. It was yellowing, perfectly round, and looked suspiciously unlike a finger mark. But I am a father. My instinct was to protect my child. I told her I would handle it. I told her to stay in the guest room. The next day, I went to see Javier. I expected to find a monster. Instead, I found a broken man sitting in the dark in a house that had been stripped of all its valuables. All of June's jewelry, the art, the silver, it was all gone. Javier looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. He didn't try to defend himself. He just handed me a tablet. On it was a video from their home security system. It showed June in the kitchen, 2 days prior. She was on the phone, laughing. I turned up the volume. She was talking to a man. I didn't recognize the voice on the other end, but the conversation chilled my blood. She was discussing the bruise. She was explaining how she had used a vacuum attachment to create the mark on her arm to frame Javier for domestic abuse. She was laughing about how she was going to sell the house, kick Javier to the curb, and use the money to fund a new venture with the man on the phone. I watched my daughter manufacture a crime to ruin a man who had done nothing but love her. I handed the tablet back to Javier. I asked him why he hadn't gone to the police. He looked at the floor and said he didn't want to humiliate me. He didn't want to drag my name through the mud by exposing my daughter as a sociopath. Even while she was holding a knife to his throat, he was trying to protect my reputation. That was the moment I realized that family is not about whose blood runs in your veins. It is about who stands by you when the storm comes. I told Javier to do exactly what I said. I told him not to show that video to anyone yet. I told him to let June file the papers. June moved into my house permanently. For weeks, I had to listen to her play the victim. She sat at my dining table, drinking my wine, spinning lies about Javier's cruelty. It took every ounce of my discipline not to throw her out. But I needed her to feel safe. I needed her to feel overconfident. She filed for divorce, alleging abuse and demanding full possession of the marital home and total liquidation of Javier's assets. She even added a clause demanding he pay for her emotional distress therapy. The midpoint of this nightmare came during the deposition preparations. June's lawyer, a sleazy man who smelled of cheap cologne and desperation, sat in my library. He told me that my testimony would be the nail in Javier's coffin. He wanted me to testify that I had seen Javier be aggressive, that I had seen the fear in June's eyes. I looked at June. She was smiling at me, a cold, predatory smile. She squeezed my hand. She said, "Daddy, you know what to do. You always protect what's ours." She was right. I do protect what is ours. But she had forgotten that Javier was part of ours, and she had ceased to be worthy of that title the moment she betrayed him. The day of the settlement hearing arrived. It wasn't a full trial yet, but a mediation to see if a settlement could be reached before a judge got involved. June sat on one side of the long mahogany table, looking fragile and teary-eyed. Javier sat on the other, looking stoic. June's lawyer began listing the demands. They were extortionate. They wanted the house, the cars, his pension, and a restraining order. Javier's lawyer, a woman I had secretly hired for him, remained calm. She asked if there was any room for negotiation. June slammed her hand on the table. She dropped the act. She screamed that she deserved everything, that she had wasted 10 years on a loser, and that if he didn't sign, she would release photos of her injuries to the press and ruin his business reputation forever. The room went silent. I stood up. I was sitting behind June. I walked around the table and stood behind Javier. June looked confused. She asked what I was doing. I pulled a USB drive from my pocket and placed it on the table in front of the mediator. I spoke clearly. I stated that I was the owner of the security system in the Victorian house, as I had paid for the installation myself and the account was in my name. I stated that the footage on the drive would prove not only that the abuse allegations were fabricated, but that June had conspired to commit fraud and perjury. June's face went white. She looked like a ghost. She stammered, trying to say I was senile, that I didn't know what I was doing. I looked her in the eye and told her that I knew exactly what I was doing. I told her that I had removed her from my will that morning. I told her that the Victorian house she wanted so badly was technically held in a trust that I controlled, and that I was evicting her from it effective immediately. She started screaming. She lunged across the table, not at Javier, but at me. She called me a traitor. She called me a pathetic old man. Javier caught her. He didn't hit her. He just held her back gently until security arrived to escort her out. The fallout was swift. June's lawyer dropped her immediately to avoid being disbarred for suborning perjury. The divorce was finalized in record time. Javier kept his assets. I transferred the deed of the Victorian house to him completely. June left town. The last I heard, she was staying in a motel 2 towns over, trying to find someone else to manipulate. I sat on the porch with Javier yesterday. We didn't say much. We just drank our coffee. He thanked me for saving his life. I told him he saved me from leaving my legacy to a monster. But as I sat there, a thought nagged at me. In that video, when June was on the phone conspiring to frame Javier, she had mentioned a name. She had been talking to a man she called Donnie. I have a brother named Donovan. We haven't spoken in 20 years because of his greed and his gambling addiction. If June has reconnected with my estranged brother Donovan, and if they are working together, then this divorce was just the opening move. Javier is safe, but I have a feeling that the target has shifted. Now, they are coming for me. This is just the beginning of the war for my family's soul. Do you want to hear what happened when my brother Donovan finally showed his face at my gate? Let me know if I should continue. My estranged brother broke into my home, not with a crowbar, but with a court order and a smile that curdled the milk in my fridge. He claimed he was here to care for me in my old age, but I knew he was here to pick the meat off my bones before I was even dead. He thought he had trapped me in a legal nightmare, but he forgot that I know where all the bodies are buried because I'm the one who dug the holes. If you believe that you should never let a toxic relative back into your life no matter how much they beg, please subscribe to the channel right now. Double check that you've hit that notification bell and leave a comment below telling me, if your siblings sued you for your own house, would you fight them or settle? I want to know what you would do. My name is Thomas, and if you heard my last story, you know I recently helped my son-in-law, Javier, escape the clutches of my sociopathic daughter, June. I thought the worst was over when I kicked June out of my house and cut her from my will. I thought I could go back to tending my garden and drinking coffee on the porch with Javier. I was wrong. The silence that followed June's departure was not peace. It was the deep breath before the scream. It started on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the divorce settlement. I was in my driveway washing my truck. Javier was over, fixing a loose shingle on the roof of the main house. It was a beautiful, crisp autumn day. Then, a black SUV pulled up to the gate, followed by a moving truck. My stomach dropped. I walked down the driveway, wiping my hands on a rag. The window of the SUV rolled down, and there he was, Donovan, my younger brother. We hadn't spoken in 20 years, not since he stole our mother's wedding ring to pay off a gambling debt in Las Vegas. He looked older, his face puffy from years of hard living, but he was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. And sitting in the passenger seat, wearing oversized sunglasses and a smirk, was June. I told them to turn around. I told them they were trespassing. Donovan just laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. He stepped out of the car and handed me a thick envelope. He said, "Hello, Tommy. Long time no see. I'm moving in." I opened the envelope. It was a copy of a deed amendment and a motion for injunctive relief. It was legal gibberish to me, but the gist was terrifying. Donovan was claiming that our father's will, which had left the estate to me 40 years ago, contained a right of habitation clause for him. He claimed that because he was now destitute and disabled, he gestured to a cane I had never seen him use before. He had the legal right to occupy the guest cottage on the property. The same guest cottage I had just evicted June from. He had a sheriff's deputy with him to enforce the civil order. The deputy looked apologetic. He told me it was a civil matter and that until a judge ruled otherwise, Donovan had a right to access the residence. I watched in horror as the movers started unloading boxes into the Victorian guest house down the lane. June waved at me as she sashayed past, carrying her designer bags back into the home she had just lost. They had outflanked me. June knew the property, and Donovan knew the dirty history of our family's legal papers. For the first week, it was psychological warfare. Donovan and June were like a cancer growing on the edge of my property. They knew they couldn't physically hurt me without going to jail, so they tried to break my mind. They would blast music at 3 in the morning. When I called the police, they would turn it off seconds before the cruiser arrived. They ordered pizzas to my house at all hours. They parked their cars so they blocked the very edge of my driveway. Just enough to be annoying, but not enough to be towed. Javier wanted to go down there and throw them out physically. I had to hold him back. I told him that's what they wanted. They wanted a reaction. They wanted us to look like the aggressors. Then the gaslighting started. I would wake up and find my back door unlocked, even though I knew I had bolted it. My keys would go missing from the hook and turn up in the freezer. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store to find all the burners on my gas stove hissing, unlit, filling the house with fumes. I was terrified. I thought I was losing my mind. I started questioning my own memory. Javier saved me from that spiral. He came over one evening and found me staring at the stove, trembling. I told him I thought I had left the gas on. Javier checked the back door. He found no signs of forced entry, but he pulled out a magnifying glass he used for detailed carpentry work. He showed me the lock. There were tiny scratches. Someone had a copy of my key. June. She had lived here. Of course she had a copy of the master key. We changed the locks that night, but the damage was done. The next day, a social worker from Adult Protective Services knocked on my door. She was a stern woman with a clipboard. She said she had received multiple anonymous reports that I was suffering from dementia, that I was leaving gas stoves on, wandering the property at night confused, and living in squalor. Donovan and June were trying to have me declared incompetent. If they succeeded, the court would appoint a guardian. And since Donovan was my brother and June was my daughter, they would be first in line to take control of my finances, my medical decisions, and my estate. They didn't just want the guest house, they wanted the whole kingdom. The interview with the social worker was grueling. I had to prove I knew the date, the president, and how to count backward from 100. I passed, but just barely. I was agitated, angry, and sleep-deprived from their music. To an outsider, I probably looked unstable. The social worker left, but she warned me that she would be back for a follow-up. She said the reports were very detailed and concerning. I needed to strike back. I needed to know what their endgame was. I knew Donovan. He was greedy, but he was also lazy. This level of coordination took effort. He needed fast money. Why was he playing the long game? Javier and I decided to run a counter-operation. Javier still had contacts from his days in construction, guys who knew the underground gossip of the city. He started digging into Donovan's life in the city he had just moved from. Meanwhile, I played the part of the crumbling old man. I stopped shaving. I let the grass grow a little too long. I walked with a shuffle when I knew they were watching. I wanted them to think they were winning. Midway through the second week, I got a break. I was pruning the roses near the property line, which is a thick hedge separating the main house from the guest cottage, when I heard voices. I crouched down. It was June and Donovan, sitting on the guest house patio. "I can't believe he's still holding on," June said. She sounded impatient. "The hearing is in 10 days. If he doesn't crack before then, the judge might just order a medical eval, and that takes too long." Donovan laughed. "Relax, sweetie. The old man is cooked. Did you see him yesterday? He was talking to the mailbox. The pills are working." My blood froze. The pills? I backed away silently and went straight to my kitchen. I checked my daily medication organizer. I take a statin for my cholesterol and a vitamin. I looked closely at the pills. They looked normal. But then I noticed a fine dust at the bottom of the Wednesday compartment. I took the pills to a pharmacist friend of mine in town. He ran a quick test. My heart medication had been swapped. They weren't vitamins. They were powerful sedatives mixed with a hallucinogen used for treating severe psychosis, but in a healthy brain, they caused confusion and paranoia. They had been poisoning me. They must have swapped the pills before I changed the locks. I was furious, but I was also armed with the truth. I stopped taking the pills immediately. The fog in my brain lifted within 24 hours. I was ready to go to the police, but Javier called me with the information he had found on Donovan. It was worse than we thought. Donovan wasn't just in debt. He was in debt to the kind of people who break kneecaps for sport. He owed $300,000 to a loan shark syndicate in Chicago. They had given him 30 days to pay up, or he was a dead man. That's why he was here. He didn't want to live in the house. He needed to get power of attorney over me so he could liquidate my assets, pay off the mob, and leave me to rot in a state-run nursing home. We had a plan. The competency hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. I decided to let it happen. I wanted to lure them into the courtroom. I wanted them to lie on the record. The day of the hearing arrived. Donovan and June sat at the plaintiff's table, looking concerned and mournful. June even dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Their lawyer presented the evidence, the logs of the police calls, the report from the social worker, and the testimony of my erratic behavior. When it was my turn, I didn't use a lawyer. I stood up. I was clean-shaven. I wore my best suit. I spoke with the clarity of a man 20 years younger. I presented the toxicology report from my pharmacist friend, confirmed by a lab. I presented the video footage Javier had installed in my kitchen, hidden cameras I hadn't told anyone about, showing June slipping into my house 3 weeks prior and tampering with my pill organizer. The judge's face went dark. He looked at June. She was shaking. But Donovan? Donovan didn't look scared. He looked bored. When the judge moved to dismiss the case and hinted at criminal charges for June, Donovan stood up. "Your Honor," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "While my niece may have acted emotionally regarding the medication, which I knew nothing about, this hearing is about my brother's capacity to manage his estate. And I'm afraid you need to see this." He pulled a document out of his briefcase. It was a deed transferring the entire estate, the main house, the land, the guest cottage, to a holding company called Phoenix Rising LLC. The deed was signed by me. It was notarized. It was dated 3 days ago. I stared at it. "That's a forgery!" I shouted. "It's not," Donovan smiled. "Check the signature, and check the video." He handed the bailiff a tablet. On the screen there was a video of me, looking groggy and confused, clearly under the influence of the drugs they had given me. In the video, Donovan is handing me a paper, telling me it's a subscription renewal for my magazines. I sign it. I signed the deed while I was drugged. "Technically," the judge said, frowning, "if the signature is authentic, this is a separate civil matter regarding the validity of the contract. This court is for competency. If you sign this while incompetent, Mr. Thomas, then you need a guardian to sue to get it back. If you were competent when you signed it, then the house belongs to the LLC. I was trapped in a catch-22. If I claimed I was incompetent due to the drugs, Donovan would become my guardian and control the lawsuit. If I claimed I was competent, I had legally signed away my house." The judge adjourned the hearing to review the evidence. He didn't grant the guardianship, but he didn't invalidate the deed yet either. We were in limbo. I walked out of the courthouse, Javier at my side. Donovan was waiting on the steps. He lit a cigarette and blew the smoke in my face. "You have 48 hours to vacate the main house, Tommy," he said. "Phoenix Rising LLC is evicting you." I looked at him. "Who owns the LLC, Donovan?" He grinned. "I do, and I already have a buyer for the land. They're going to bulldoze your garden and put up a strip mall." He walked away, laughing. June trailed behind him, looking unsure now, realizing that Donovan was the one holding all the cards, not her. I went back to the estate. I felt defeated. I had the truth, but he had the law, twisted and knotted up in a way that would take years to untangle. I didn't have years. Javier sat me down at the kitchen table. He put his heavy hand on my shoulder. "Pops," he said, "we can't fight him in court. He's too dirty. We have to fight him his way." "What do you mean?" I asked. Javier pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. It was the background check on the loan sharks Donovan owed money to. "We know who he owes," Javier said, "and we know they're looking for him. Donovan thinks he's safe because he's about to get your money. But what if the money disappears? What if the asset he promised them, this land, becomes worthless overnight? I looked at Javier. I saw a spark in his eye that I hadn't seen before. It was dangerous. It was reckless. How do we make the land worthless? I asked. Javier smiled. We don't. We just make it radioactive, literally or figuratively. I know where the old town dump used to be buried on the North Acre. If we report an environmental hazard. He stopped. There was a knock at the door. It wasn't the police. It wasn't Donovan. It was a young woman. She looked to be about 25. She had June's eyes and my late wife's chin. She was holding a letter. "Are you Thomas?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "My name is Maya," she said. I think I'm your granddaughter, but not from June." I froze. "I'm Donovan's daughter," she said. "He walked out on my mom before I was born. I heard he was here. I heard he's trying to steal your house." She stepped into the light. "He stole my mother's life savings before she died," she said. "And I have the documents to prove he's been running this guardianship scam in 3 other states. I can help you bury him, but I want half the money when he falls." I looked at Javier. Then I looked at this stranger who wore my family's face. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Or is she another shark in the water? I invited her in. Donovan thinks he has won. He thinks the house is his. But he doesn't know that the family reunion just got a little bit bigger and a whole lot more dangerous. We have 48 hours to save everything I've built, and I'm about to break every rule I've ever followed. Do you want to see how the final battle plays out? Let me know if I should continue. I never thought I would see the day when I would invite a stranger into my home to help me destroy my own brother. But desperation makes for strange bedfellows. I stood in my kitchen looking at Maya, a young woman claiming to be my niece, and I saw the same sharp intelligence that my brother Donovan used for evil. The only difference was that her eyes burned with the cold fire of vengeance, not greed. She didn't want my money. She wanted to see her father fall. If you believe that justice is best served cold, and that family betrayal deserves the harshest punishment, please double-check that you are subscribed to the channel. Leave a comment below telling me, if a long-lost relative showed up claiming they could solve your biggest problem, would you trust them? I want to hear your thoughts. We had 48 hours before Donovan, my estranged brother, intended to evict me from the home I had built with my own hands. He had tricked me into signing a deed transfer while I was drugged, handing my estate over to his shell company, Phoenix Rising LLC. He planned to sell the land to a developer who would bulldoze my life's work to build a strip mall, all to pay off the $300,000 he owed to a violent syndicate of loan sharks. Maya sat at my kitchen table, laying out documents like a general planning an invasion. She explained that Donovan had pulled this scam before in Florida and Arizona. He would move in with an elderly relative, isolate them, gain power of attorney, or trick them into signing over assets and then liquidate everything before moving on. He was a predator, but he had made a mistake. He didn't know I existed, Maya said, tapping a finger on a photocopy of a birth certificate. He walked out on my mother before I was born. He thinks he has no loose ends, but I've been tracking him for 2 years. I've been building a file for the FBI, but they move too slow. You don't have months. You have hours. Javier, my son-in-law and the only man I truly trusted, crossed his arms. So what's the play? We can't legally void the deed in 2 days. The courts are backed up. Maya smiled, and it was terrifying. We don't need the courts. We need to leverage his fear. Donovan is desperate. The loan sharks gave him a deadline. He needs that sale to go through by Friday, or he's a dead man walking. We are going to sabotage the sale. Here was the plan. The developer Donovan had lined up was a company called Vantage, strictly looking for clean land. They wanted to break ground immediately. If there was any hint of environmental liability, they would walk. Javier's idea of faking a toxic dump was good, but Maya took it a step further. She was a paralegal. She whipped out her laptop and drafted a fake menacing letter from the Environmental Protection Bureau, stating that the groundwater on my property was flagged for potential chemical contamination due to a fictional historic industrial runoff from the 1950s. It looked official. It looked devastating. But we needed to deliver it in a way that Donovan wouldn't suspect. That's where June came in. My daughter, who was currently living in the guest house with Donovan, thinking she was his partner. She didn't know about the loan sharks. She thought they were just going to be rich. I knew June. She was greedy, but she was also paranoid. I walked down to the guest house the next morning. I carried a white flag, literally a white dish towel. Donovan came out to the porch looking smug. June was behind him looking wary. "I'm done fighting," I told them, keeping my voice trembling. "You won, Donovan. The lawyer told me I can't beat the signature. I just want to pack my things and leave with some dignity." Donovan laughed. "Smart move, Tommy. You have until tomorrow at noon." I nodded. I wanted to warn you," I said, looking at June. I was going through my old files trying to find the septic tank blueprints for the new owners. I found some old letters from Dad. Apparently, he buried some old farm equipment and chemical drums in the north pasture back in the 60s. I don't want you to get sued by the new buyers if they dig it up. I saw the flicker of panic in June's eyes. Donovan dismissed it. Who cares? Sold is sold. Once I get the check, it's their problem. I walked away. I knew June would go looking. Sure enough, an hour later, I saw June in the north pasture with a shovel. Javier and I had spent the previous night burying a few rusted, ominous-looking metal barrels half deep in the soil, painting them with skull and crossbones symbols we bought from a hardware store stencil kit. It was theatrical, but June wasn't a scholar. She dug up the edge of a barrel. She saw the symbol. She panicked. I watched from the window as she ran back to the guest house. I could hear the screaming match from my porch. June was yelling that they were going to go to prison for environmental fraud. Donovan was yelling that she was an idiot. Phase 1 was complete. The seed of doubt was planted. Phase 2 was the buyer. Maya had a friend, a large, intimidating man named Saul who worked as a bouncer but could act in a pinch. We dressed him in a cheap suit. He drove up to the gate in a rented luxury sedan at 2 p.m. He wasn't the developer. He was the inspector for the developer. Donovan met him at the gate, sweating. Saul played his part perfectly. He walked the property, poking the ground with a stick. He went to the north pasture. He looked at the barrels June had partially unearthed. He walked back to Donovan. I heard him say the words clearly. "This is a hazmat site. Vantage is pulling the offer. We're not buying a toxic lawsuit." The color drained from Donovan's face. He grabbed Saul's arm. "Wait, we can fix it. We can clean it." Saul shook him off. "Deal's off. And I'm reporting this to the county." He drove away. Donovan was left standing in the driveway, trembling. He had less than 24 hours to pay the sharks, and his golden ticket just evaporated. That evening, the atmosphere on the estate was suffocating. I sat in the dark in my living room with Javier and Maya. We waited. At 9 p.m., my phone rang. It was Donovan. His voice was cracked, desperate. "Tommy," he said, "we need to talk." He came over. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He smelled of whiskey and fear. "I can't sell the land," he admitted. "The deal fell through." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said calmly. "I need money, Tommy. I need it now. You have cash. I know you have a safe." I looked at him. "I have some savings," I said. "But why would I give it to you? You stole my house." "I'll give it back," he screamed. He pulled the deed out of his jacket. It was the original. "I'll tear it up. I'll sign a quitclaim. Just give me $50,000. That's enough to buy me a week with my creditors." He was shaking. The man who had sneered at me 2 days ago was now begging for scraps. I looked at Maya. She gave me a subtle nod. "Okay," I said. "I'll buy back my own house. But we do it legally. You sign the quitclaim deed in front of a notary, and I'll give you the cash." "We don't have time for a notary," he shouted. Maya stepped forward. "I'm a notary," she lied. Her stamp was fake, bought online, but Donovan didn't know that. Donovan looked at her. "Who is she?" "My paralegal," I said. He didn't care. He slapped the papers on the table. He signed the quitclaim deed, transferring the property back to me, Thomas, free and clear. He scribbled his signature so hard the pen tore the paper. "Now give me the money," he demanded. I picked up the deed. I handed it to Javier. He checked it. It was valid. The house was mine again. I looked at Donovan. "I don't have $50,000 here, Donovan. I have about $200 in my wallet." He froze. "You lied to me." "I learned from the best," I said. Donovan's face twisted into a mask of pure rage. He lunged at me. He pulled a small pistol from his waistband. Javier was faster. He tackled Donovan, slamming him into the kitchen island. The gun skittered across the floor. At that exact moment, the front door burst open. It wasn't the police. It was June. She was holding a bag. She looked wild-eyed. She saw Donovan pinned on the floor. "He's broke," she screamed at me. "He told me he was a millionaire. He has nothing." She had been raiding his suitcases while he was over here. Then, sirens. Real ones. Maya had called the police the moment Donovan pulled the gun, but she had also called someone else. She had tipped off the FBI task force that had been tracking Donovan's interstate fraud ring. The lights flashed through the windows. Deputies swarmed the house. They found Donovan on the floor, Javier holding him down. They found the gun. Donovan was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon, elder abuse, and multiple counts of fraud across state lines. As they dragged him out in handcuffs, he looked at me. "You're dead, Tommy. My friends will come for you." I walked out to the porch. I looked at the deputy. "Officer," I said, "this man mentioned he owes money to the Chicago syndicate. You might want to put him in protective custody. He's not safe on the streets." Donovan went pale. I had just ensured he would have to flip on the mob to survive in prison. I had ruined him completely. June was standing in the driveway, sobbing. She looked at me. "Daddy," she whined. I didn't know. "He tricked me, too. Can I come inside?" I looked at my daughter. The woman who had framed her husband, tried to steal my home, and allied with a monster. I looked at Javier, standing strong and loyal beside me. I looked at Maya, the granddaughter I never knew I had, who had saved us all. "No, June," I said. "You made your choice. You're trespassing. Get off my property." She wailed, but the deputies escorted her to her car. She drove away into the night, homeless and penniless. The aftermath was swift. Donovan is currently awaiting trial without bail. The environmental hazard was miraculously cleared up with a new soil test I paid for. The deed is back in my name. Maya stayed for a week. We talked about her father, about the years she missed. She didn't want a relationship, not really. She was a lone wolf. But before she left, I handed her a check for $50,000, the money I had promised Donovan. She looked at it, surprised. "You earned it," I said. "You're family." She smiled, a real smile this time. She took the check and drove off. I have a feeling I'll see her again. I sat on the porch with Javier yesterday. The estate was quiet. The sun was setting over the trees. "We won," Javier said. "We did," I answered. "But I lost a brother and a daughter to get here." Javier poured me a cup of coffee. "You didn't lose them, Pops. You just finally let go of the anchors that were dragging you down." He was right. I looked at him. I realized that inheritance isn't about who gets the money when you die. It's about who you trust with your life while you're alive. I'm rewriting my will tomorrow. Everything goes to Javier, and maybe a little trust fund for Maya, just in case she ever decides to come home. Family isn't blood. It's the people who bleed for you. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this saga of justice and revenge, please like the video and subscribe. And remember, keep your friends close, but watch your family closer.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.